What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be going over the 5 rules of route running to take you from a more average wide receiver to an elite wide receiver. So the first rule of route running is going to be keeping your frequency the same on all routes. What do I mean by frequency? By frequency, I mean just like honestly keeping things the exact same. Don't change up your speed, your stride, and your body language. Those are the 3 key things that are going to sell every single route that you run, from a 3-step slant to like a 12-yard stop like we see this wide receiver run here. So obviously on every single route, we want to get this DB to think that we are trying to run past him. They call it selling vertical, and selling vertical comes from keeping your frequency or keeping your route frequency the same. So that does not mean that you have to run as hard as you possibly can. You obviously want to run hard. You don't want to run slow, but your speed should not change. So you look at this wide receiver. Let's start with his speed. From the start of the route all the way to the end of the route, he does not slow down. Everything is the exact same until it is time for him to put the brakes on him. What he uses to put the brakes on is dropping of his hips. If you're running a route like a post, what stops you is obviously that hard cut that you put in the ground, but you're not slowing down or changing your speed frequency before you do that. If you do that, that DB is going to know a break is coming. He's going to slow down, and that's going to decrease the amount of separation that we have. So let's look at his strides now, right? So he comes off the ball, he gives this little release, but look at his strides. Nothing changes with his strides. He is running with just like normal sprinter strides, and he is able to cut while in full stride. That is how you sell the route. That ties in obviously with your speed. But last but not least, let's look at his body language, because that's what a DB is ultimately watching. Whenever a DB is in man-to-man coverage or he's in off-man coverage, whatever, his eyes are going to be reading our hips, reading our posture, aka again, the body language. So it shouldn't change. From the start of the route to the end of the route, you see how he has this slight forward lean because he doesn't give up the break, especially routes where wide receivers have to drop their hips. A lot of receivers, what they'll do is they will raise up with their chest and kind of like raise their hips so they can drop, but that just tells that DB the break is coming. So if we keep the same speed, the same stride, the same body language, we are going to get more separations on our route. That is why it's the first rule of route running. So great example for this wide receiver running a stop route with that throw by move attached. Now, second rule of route running is going to be keeping spacing. So what do I mean by keeping spacing? Before we get into that though, fellas, if you are a wide receiver or a quarterback watching this video and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches, we are going to be traveling out to 15 different cities across the entire U.S. for 2-day long QB and wide receiver training camps this year. So if you guys would like some more information, how you could sign up, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you there. Our first camps, or first, I guess you could say 5 camps. We already had one in San Francisco. We had one in Orlando. Our next one's going to be in Phoenix, then Charlotte, then Austin. All of those are sold out, and the remainder of these camps will sell out because we limit spots. So each athlete could get individual work and individual attention. Our Vegas camp is almost sold out. Same with Seattle, same with Chicago, and same with Newark. And then we'll be heading out to Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, if you want some more information, want to learn how you can sign up, check out again that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you there. In our Austin, Texas camp as well, we have room for high school age wide receivers, so ages 14 and above. So again, guys, very first link in that description below. We'd love to have you out. Let's get to this second example. So spacing on a play would be like, let's drop a route concept on the screen here for just a second. Tyreek Hill is going to be running like a 10-yard dig. Let's say it's like a double dig concept, right? So like, let's say this is Tyreek Hill here, and let's say this is your slot receiver. He's running like a 10 to 12-yard dig. Let's say your slot receiver has to run an 8-yard dig. You need to maintain this spacing between the dig, between your slot receiver, because the quarterback needs to be able to get a read on a certain player. So the quarterback might be reading this like linebacker. If the linebacker crashes on this dig, he throws this first dig in the first window, right? Or he might be reading a safety. Now, if your dig route, like so let's say the slot receiver's running this dig here. If you're the outside and your dig route is right over here, right on top of the other guy, one defender could guard both routes. So that screws up the quarterback's read. That's what spacing is. So that's why the second rule of route running is going to be maintaining spacing by taking what the DB gives us with our release. Now, this DB is lined up a little bit inside shade. On the snap of the ball, he takes a leverage step to protect the inside. So Tyreek Hill takes the outside release. I mean, it's not the greatest route in the world. Obviously, having a ton of speed helps Tyreek Hill in this situation. But again, guys, he did not force that inside release and get rerouted all the way across the field. That's what so many guys struggle with, is that they'll come off the ball because they have to run an inside breaking route. If that DB takes away the inside, and this is that leverage step I was talking about with this DB where he takes a step to protect the inside. If they try to force that inside release, DB's job when he's inside leverage is to not let the receiver go to the inside. He doesn't want to give up a dig, a slant, a post. So if we just try to force it, he's going to get hands on me, he's going to protect his leverage, and your route is going to end up right on top of the slot or way on the other side of the field, and that's bad spacing. So you have to get comfortable releasing outside even when you have an inside breaking route like a dig, like a curl, or like a post. So when he comes off the ball here, obviously Tyreek Hill gives us a little move to attack his leverage to the inside. We want to hold him there, make him think we're trying to break his leverage and take that outside release. Now we could do one of two things right here as a receiver on like a post route or even a dig route. I could work to stack this DB, which is where we get him trailing directly behind us, which is what Tyreek Hill is able to do. Obviously having great speed can help with that. But if this DB's right on my hip and maybe I can't stack him, what I could do is I could drop my hips like that last example, put the hand on the back of his hip, back of his shoulder, and cut under it. Now, the break might be a little bit slower when you do that, but at least your spacing is there. And again, remember, selling vertical in this situation is all built off of that first example we talked about with our route frequency. So second rule of route running, you guys, is going to be keeping spacing on the play. If you can do that, you can sell your routes like we discussed in rule 1, you're going to be more efficient with your routes. Number 2, or I guess say rule number 3, excuse me. Rule number 3 is going to be with your press release. So anytime that you have a DB guarding you in press coverage, we talked about this, where are his eyes supposed to be? They're supposed to be watching our hips. So rule number 3 of route running is with your press releases, you need to sell those with your hips. So this wide receiver is going to be doing something called a wide step release, which is where you take this back leg and you were trying to step here, like step wide to make this DB think that we are running, a drag route, a slant route, etc. Obviously, his stance is switched, which helps with this. Generally, obviously, your inside foot would be up in most cases, and this wide step would be with your right foot, and you'd be trying to sell like an outside release, but you could do it from either or. But I want you to pay attention to what his hip does and what his body does when he decides to throw this cut. And this is something so many young receivers don't do. So he comes off the ball, uses a little kick step move, and see how bad that DB bites on this thing. It's because he sold it with his hips, you guys. So let's go back to it. So obviously, like a lot of receiver coaches will say that this first move right here is a false step. It's actually not. It's a part of the release. It's a way to load up your hips so you can throw your hip, right? So he kicks behind his front foot. It's a quick step. He's loading into his hips. So when he throws that cut, pay attention to how far his hip goes and where his head goes with the foot. That is what sells the move. We're trying to make him think we're running a drag. So my hips got to say that I'm running a drag. So what I tell my receivers all the time is you want to shoot to be like stacked. By stacked, I mean you want your head, you want your knee, and you want your foot. I should say hip. You want your head, your hip, and your foot to be stacked on top of each other the best you can, right? So you're throwing that cut to the inside with your left foot. Your head and your left hip need to go with that foot. It's attached. So many times receivers try to do all these fancy moves off the ball or even just quick moves off the ball, but they're just stepping. They're not actually bringing this upper half, and that's not what's going to get that DB to bite. We can't just step. We have to bring my hip and my head with the cut if you want to get more separation. So that kick step, and for those of you that have never tried this kick step, I highly recommend it for this. But that kick behind your front foot is like a way to load into it. You're loading up your hips, so you're almost like jumping and throwing yourself into that first move right there. So there's a great example of that, guys. That's why the third rule of route running is selling your press releases with your hips. Now, rule number 4, you guys, has to do with the hand technique off the ball versus a press coverage DB. And honestly, what I would say to you is keep things simple. That's the most important thing when it comes to your hand technique, because we talk a lot about releases on this channel. We just talked about that wide step one, but obviously your hands matter. A DB's goal when he's in press coverage is to get hands on the wide receiver to disrupt timing with the quarterback. That is his goal. But if I know what hand to beat as a wide receiver, my job gets a lot easier. So this is a great example of A.J. Brown just straight up running past a dude because he does not get hands to seal that inside release. The hand technique that you use off the ball is all predicated on the release that you decide to choose, right? So A.J. Brown is got a reduced split, which means that he's lined up closer to like the offensive lineman, right? Now, a lot of receivers will do that to do one of two things. They will do it either to run like a drag route or they will do it to run an outside breaking route, because why would you cut your split down to go run like a dig? Like it's just unlikely. So DBs are smart and they'll line up outside leverage. They have help to the inside over here. So if he decides to run that drag, he's going right into the help. And if he wants to run like a post, he's also probably going right into some type of like safety help, right? So if this DB's outside leverage and we have to run a corner like A.J. Brown does here, I'm not going to force that outside release. Remember what we talked about with Tyreek Hill. We got to keep spacing. So if he were to just try to give like a move and take this outside release right here, that DB is going to keep that leverage. He's going to widen, and that corner is going to be right on the sideline, which is not enough room for that quarterback. And we're going to talk about that with our 5th rule of route running here in a second. So what we got to do is we got to take the inside release, and my goal is to obviously stack him to where he's trailing behind me. I give him a move and then go run my corner, and I gave my QB a bunch of space. So what he does here is he comes off the ball. this DB's not the only hand that's going to prevent the inside release is this DB's inside hand. So my mindset as a wide receiver here would be, okay, maybe I could give him a move outside. A.J. Brown just takes off and runs, which, I mean, in some cases is fine if you feel you're just straight up faster than the guy. But his mindset is just, I'm going to beat this inside hand. So what if the DB recovers with this outside hand? I'm already off press. I'm already up into my route. I'm just going to shrug and fight, and I'm good. And that's why he's able to stack him, because that DB didn't even throw the inside hand. So if we know which hand to beat, you're going to be more consistent with your hands off the ball, and you could focus more on your feet and the release that you're going to choose. Let's say this DB was inside leverage, right? We would want to take an outside release. So the hand that I would have to beat would be his outside hand. Keep the hand technique simple, you guys. If you keep the hand technique simple, you're going to be a much more successful receiver versus press coverage. So now, let's get into the fifth rule of route running here, and that is going to be getting skinny with your route. So this is a great example of getting skinny after just completely hooking a DB off the ball to give the quarterback room. So he comes off the ball. This DB's playing some type of catch technique where he's maybe about 2 yards off. This receiver's also running a corner route like A.J. Brown, but he closes the space, gives a move, but I want you to pay attention to how he gets back into the DB's cushion to give that quarterback room. And even so, he had to make a toe tap catch, right? And so that's why. That's why getting skinny is important. We have to give the QB room. So he comes off the ball, gives this DB a move to the inside, and gets him to jump. He could easily just go run his corner right now. But that would cut down the amount of space the QB has to throw this ball. And that quarterback has to go through reads. He has to go through his drop. So it's not just all about us. Not just all about us getting open. It's about giving the quarterback, again, spacing, but staying on timing with the play. So instead of just running wide and maybe potentially letting the DB cut him off, he tries to get his hip right back into this DB's hip. He goes hip to hip with him, and he almost leans into him. Because what that does, that still maintains all of the space to the outside he had pre-snap by lining up out of the slot. So when he decides to cut, that's an easy throw for the quarterback. You give quarterback room like that, and you have maybe even just one step on a DB, that's an easy completion for him. So fifth rule of route running is getting skinny. Getting skinny helps the quarterback out. It can also help you restack a defender, but that is something that you must do anytime that you're running an outside breaking route.